Hello everybody, welcome to Little Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like if you have not already. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about a very common talking point around one of my favorite players. Sometimes I've been thinking lately, maybe my favorite player of all time, Stephen Curry, and this specifically relates to the all-time point guard debate between him and Magic Johnson. Now, I made a video quite a while ago, I think last off-season, so it's probably less than a year ago, but it was about Steph versus Magic, who was the greater all-time player overall, who actually deserved the title of greatest point guard of all time. And I think my overall take was I was still more on Magic sides than Steph, but I think they're close enough that it's okay to feel either way. And more importantly, while it's okay to feel that either one of them is the GOAT point guard, what is not okay to me, what I find very, very obnoxious, is the argument that Steph just simply can't be the greatest point guard of all time because he isn't one. Let's hear what Theo Pinson has to say about this.
Do you really, when you hear Stephen Curry, do you think point guard?
No.
He's not a point guard.
But he happens to play point guard.
He's not the greatest point guard of all time. I don't think it's Stephen Curry is. He is the best shooter of all time.
But he doesn't play point guard all the time.
That's true.
He's off the ball. He is the best
shooter
we've ever seen. He's the best off the ball player we have ever seen. And then within that dynamic, he has the ability to play in pick and rolls because he can score it. But he doesn't, if you watch him, like he'll pass it and stuff like that, but a lot of his passes are off pins where two guys are on it and he gets off it. Like he's a different type of player. I just wouldn't, in my opinion.
All right, I was going to play the whole clip. We'll play the end of it in a second here. That's what really fucking bothers me about this conversation. What he just said about, when he's passing, it's him doing it off of a pin because he has two defenders chasing him. Yeah, that's what a point guard is supposed to do, is bring the attention of the defense and make the right play. Where people get mad at Steph is that he didn't dribble the ball 24/7 and he isn't the craziest assist per game average guy. But this to me is an extremely limited view of what a point guard is. A point guard is not necessarily a player who dribbles the ball all the time. A point guard is not necessarily a player who averages double-digit assists per game. A point guard is a player who plays the position of point guard and is capable of doing point guard-like things, and they do that at a very high volume. Even if a player who is a point guard often runs a set that is more shooting guard-like, that does not disqualify them from being a point guard. Just like if you were a power forward, but you played center pretty often, it does not mean you are not a power forward. You are the position that you primarily play and the position that you primarily play like. But people are limiting the point guard position to purely being a ball-handling playmaker. And Steph is really, 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 really good at that. But that comes from his scoring gravity. I say this routinely, that Stephen Curry is one of the greatest playmakers basketball has ever seen, and a lot of people get baffled by that statement. But I'm not talking about averaging assists. I'm not talking about putting up double-digit assists throughout a championship run like Magic Johnson. That's not what I'm fucking talking about. I'm talking about generating good looks for your teammate regardless of how it affects your box score. Stephen Curry gets, what is spiritually an assist because of the scoring gravity that he brings to the table so frequently to such a high degree, incomparable to other players throughout NBA history, that he ends up being one of the most effective playmakers basketball has ever seen or will ever see. So while yes, Steph does a lot of off-ball sets, and Steph doesn't always dribble the ball the whole possession. That's not his thing most of the time. That does not make him not a point guard. I don't see how that can make him a point guard make him not a point guard any less than it makes Magic Johnson not a point guard for the fact that he was a post-up player, for the fact that that was like the most prominent aspect of his game. If that's going to be the case, then I really just do not see how you can limit Steph and knock him out of this conversation, but you can't knock Magic out of it, the fucking 6'9" point guard who played like a big man half of the time in the half court. You can post up half the time in the half court, and that's point guard like, but heaven forbid you're running off some down screens. It's arbitrary. It's ridiculous. And if you want to nitpick what positions are supposed to do, well, then you're suddenly going to end up finding a lot of players who aren't the position that you claim they are. But for some reason, this is super acceptable to do with StEPh because people are so true point guard pilled that they've decided any player that doesn't play like a true point guard isn't one. Is Kyrie Irving not a point guard? I never fucking hear people say that Kyrie Irving is not a point guard. I mean, he's played shooting guard in recent years, but when he was a point guard on the Celtics, on the Cleveland Cavaliers, you weren't getting people saying, "Oh, but Kyrie doesn't count as one of the best point guards in the NBA because he's not really a playmaker. He's score first. He looks for his shot all the time. He plays off ball a lot. He's a shooting guard." No, that's fucking dumb. It's not how it works at all. People weren't calling James Harden a point guard when he was effectively playing the point guard position for like 3 or 4 years. All right, you're the position that you're listed at, and unless you're just playing way, way, way beyond the scope of what you're expected to do within that position, then you're that position. That's the end of the fucking conversation. But we'll continue. There's some more, I believe.
I don't put him in the point guard mold because I don't think he plays like a Chris Paul or like a Isaiah Thomas played or Magic Johnson.
And this is the only reason you say that too is because like
the game's changed.
You only say point guard because he's short. If he wasn't short,
he has to play point guard. Yeah.
No, he don't play the point guard. The greatest point guard of all time is Magic Johnson, in my opinion.
Saying Stephen Curry doesn't play point guard as a blanket statement is wildly ignorant. All right, the dude does run the offense first and foremost before anybody else throughout his entire time in Golden State. Now, he might not run it literally in the sense that he has the ball and is being that engine at the center of things constantly. He is, however, being a point guard and orchestrating the offense as a ball handler constantly, and he has throughout his entire career. You do not average 6.4 assists per game for your career not being a point guard at times, or at least as a small guard at his size. You know, you could average those numbers as a forward. You know, I guess if your assists are too high as a forward, then you're a point guard playing forward. But no, Steph has had 7 assists per game seasons. His 2015 season, he averaged 7.7 per game. And when you look at his shooting numbers, like his shit is like largely unassisted. Only 60% of his threes in his career are assisted, meaning that 40% of the time he is taking a three off of the dribble. You know what point guards do? Dribble. 35% of his two-pointers throughout his career have been assisted, meaning anytime Steph is inside the arc, you know, 2 out of every 3 times, that's him creating his own shot off of the dribble. Steph Curry is a very prominent on-ball creator, and he's also a very prominent off-ball creator. And the suggestion that one negates the other from existence, to me, it's ridiculous. Like, if you want to say Steph is a combo guard, including point guard, I am perfectly okay with that assessment. Because, yeah, in terms of his sets, in terms of his play style, he absolutely plays like a shooting guard at times. But saying that he isn't a point guard as a blanket statement is ridiculous. And to me, again, if you're going to use arbitrary, you know, shit that's just like a very strict definition of what a point guard is to block Stephen Curry out of that conversation, then I really don't understand why you can't do the same, why you wouldn't do the same thing with Magic Johnson. You give me a break. You say you only think he's a point guard because he's small. Well, if that's the limited. If you're allowed to, so he goes. You're not. You think of him as a point guard because he's small. Like that makes like this height thing is arbitrary. But then the fact that he plays off ball 50% of the time, that's not arbitrary. Really seems like you're just picking and choosing shit. Like my big takeaway here. You don't have to say that Steph isn't a point guard to say he's not the greatest point guard of all time. I personally have Magic over Steph as a point guard and as a player, which is fine. I don't need to say that Steph isn't a point guard to do that. And the guy himself, I don't know the name of Theo's co-host, but he goes, the game has changed. Yeah, So are we just saying there aren't point guards anymore? Is that how it works? Because the game's changed to where scoring at the point guard position is more prominent. I guess that just means no one's a point guard. Or do we just have a little bit different of an idea of what a point guard is than we did in the 1990s? I think the second one's more reasonable and far less reductive than whatever the fuck this shit was.